Here we are, the Anti-Neocon Report. We got Keith Knight in the house, and we're on time. Rumble just has a couple minutes lag, so don't get on me about that. How you doing, sir? Haven't seen you in a while.
I I am doing fine, Ryan. Thank you so much for having me, brother.
Thanks for dressing up. You got your book out. You're writing over there at the Libertarian Institute, sometimes antiwar.com as well. And I wanted to get your thoughts. Oh, nice. Wait, hold that up a little longer, a little bit longer. There you go.
It it
Domestic
is titled
imperialism.
Domestic Imperialism with the great villains of US history.
Yeah, 9 reasons why you left progressivism.
Correct.
We can go over that in a bit. We have to talk about some of the current news. There's ongoing war in Ukraine, ongoing genocide in Gaza, and then of course, former President Trump. I got ready to say Trump, whatever. Just got found guilty on all 34 felony accounts in New York. I'm sure it was a perfectly fair trial. Uh I don't like this at all. I don't like it's not that I like Trump. I just don't like this blatant weaponization of the judicial system to go after people they don't like. Your thoughts on that?
It's amazing to see how much power the left has while they're constantly screaming about how they are on the side of the oppressed. If you look at all 34 counts, which Fox News made the documents public, it just says 34 times falsifying business documents again and again and again. Now, if that's the metric of what is so bad that we have to put someone who was president in jail, that metric, of course, could be applied to basically any other president for far worse crimes
In
against the human
every
race.
major business anywhere. Yeah. He
Oh,
um
yeah.
he had no criminal record at all. And so you're gonna have falsifying business account. What basically like they didn't agree with his appraisal of his property, how much it was worth. They go, it wasn't worth that much, it was worth this much. It was like, well, he sold it for that amount, so it is worth that, whatever. But yeah.
These
Yeah.
disputes are just unbelievable. There's great research done by a gentleman named Hasness. John Hasness is his name, and he analyzed a number of researchers who looked through, who were certified public accountants, who read through people's incomes and looked at the tax code. The tax code in America is 72,000 pages. And all of these
Right.
certified public accountants came to different conclusions as to how much this person or organization owes in taxes, what the legitimate amount is based on income, capital gains, assets, property values, etc. So it is extraordinarily difficult for the most qualified people in society to come to the same conclusion on something as complex as business evaluations. Of course, you're going to get massively different valuations when you're dealing with the owner and a potential buyer, let alone people who have the same certification in the same exact industry.
Yeah, and some of the value is based on it being Trump's because his name has a bit of brand recognition and push to it. It might not work for someone else, but it's all subjective when you're talking about how much a property's worth or how much this is that. And whatever. I mean, he paid off all the debts and things. So what's the problem? And it's clearly the most recent thing in a series of assaults. They accused him of rape for like several different women. Those stories were ridiculous, especially the woman who had a cat named Vagina claimed she did it in the dressing room of a Macy's. But, like
Yeah, like the
with
name of the
Trump,
store is
like
like
nobody noticed
$1.
that. Yeah, and then
Just
they had
unbelievable. And even
they
that,
had
the
some
statute
porn
of
star testifying, and I don't know how was that relevant to the business appraisal again? Just there to
oh,
smear his name.
it
Stormy
certainly isn't.
Daniels.
And it's not like he is put on trial for rape. He is was allegedly charged or it was sued that he falsified I guess she sued him for libel because the statute of limitations ran out on an alleged rape case. So by calling her a liar, he libeled her in the public. Now, watch this woman her interview with Anderson Cooper. This is
Yeah.
extraordinarily bizarre behavior. I think it's extremely unlikely
Yeah, rape's
that
not
this
physical.
happened.
Cut the commercial. Rape is physical.
I
It
think
has to
most
be.
people think it's sexy, and Anderson Cooper
Right.
doesn't know what the hell to say. Yeah. And then
It's her
Stormy
fantasy.
Daniels, it's not like he's on trial for cheating on his wife or lying. It's alleged hush money of $130,000. More absolutely ridiculous nonsense. Anything to focus on trivial things that could technically only apply to one person and nothing in principle. This is what we get after kids are in school for 12 years and then they get another 4 years of progressivism at universities. This is what the general population is really interested in. It is so unfortunate. So to see the left
Well, there were
offer
Epstein
legal system.
clients getting, well, Epstein, I see, women, I guess, getting $20,000 a month in hush money from Deutsche Bank. And that lawsuit, what they did is the woman that presented it, Denise George from the Virgin Islands, got fired, but she still made the indictments, and no names, nothing, no news. Nobody could tell you besides the names I just said. They wouldn't know one of those Jane Does. They wouldn't know one of the Johns, because that's a bunch of Wall Street hedge fund managers and whatnot. They're right there on that wall. But no, nothing there. But with Trump, oh, everybody knows Stormy Daniels. Everybody knows $130,000 too, because it's on all day, every day. But they ever proved that was the case. It's like, hey, lady, if you got $130,000 plus some date, what are you complaining about? No. You're a porn star. You fuck people for money anyway.
Exactly. Well,
Isn't that something too? Prostitution's illegal, but if you do it on film and get paid and just let everyone else watch it, then it's legal.
Then it's
Just
called
fine.
pornography. Then
Mhm.
then it's totally legitimate. Exactly. With the Epstein story, are you familiar with Eli Cohen, the Israeli spy in Syria in the late 60s and 70s? This
Yeah, in
book.
fact, I think it was Eric Weinstein alluded to him at the very long end of this, like questions about Epstein, and he didn't want to say, but he brought him up. And if anyone knows that story, they know which country he was talking about.
Oh, it's almost it reeks of a Mossad operation. Basically, I summarized this book. It's titled "Our Man in Damascus," written some years ago.
That's
Once
right.
the documents
Man, I'm
more
glad you
easy
know this
to
shit. As
access.
very few people can. All right, go ahead. Go ahead. Tell them about what he did. The honey
It's
trap,
just
a male one.
it's just unbelievable. This Jewish gentleman, Eli Cohen, applies for a job for Israeli intelligence, and they send him to Argentina to be not an Israeli spy, not to get into the government, just to be a wealthy businessman and develop very complex connections. From Argentina, he then goes to Syria, makes friends with all the Syrian officials, and has a number of products which allow him to film these people in very vulnerable positions. And then he gives that information to the Mossad in Israel. He was caught eventually over the radio when he was sending Morse code. He was then lynched in Syria. So we have an actual example of this honeypot operation taking place long before it was at a very low cost where you could get these small cameras. But sure enough, Eli Cohen was engaged in it. The book is Our Man in Damascus. I have a brief summary on my YouTube channel of this book, and
Compromise the
yeah,
controllers. Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, that certainly seems to be what something like this is with Jeffrey Epstein.
Oh,
You have
Epstein was definitely
Alexander
it was
Acosta.
Israeli backed. I mean, the Wexner Foundation and Les Wexner and all of his progenitors that basically gave him a house for almost nothing and was his sole financer for a long time go right back to the Israelis, as does Maxwell and her family. It's pretty clear who was protecting him. When Acosta said, I was told it was intelligence in the back off, CIA wasn't
Mhm.
spying on itself. You look at every single one of the people on that map, it's just all day long.
It is such a pattern, and the fact that people are not able to just discuss it openly as they constantly vilify. There's too many whites in this organization. Whites have higher incomes than blacks. They're in positions of power.
Whites.
Historically, they've really called the shots and things. It's like There's another demographic that this applies to, which is in no way to vilify this demographic. If you look at the 2018 US Census, there are about 14 groups that have higher incomes than whites. Indian Americans, Japanese Americans, Taiwanese Americans, Vietnamese, Nigerian Americans. I get that there's a selection process with immigration, but
Sure.
just because there are people disproportionately in power or have higher incomes or disproportionately are involved in Ivy Leagues, that's no reason to vilify them, but to completely ignore it in one area of the Judaism area, and then to constantly vilify whites. This is a recipe for disaster, and I hate the game that the left is playing with this.
When you have a religion that purports ethnic nepotism, that divides the whole world into us and them, Jewish and Gentile, when they have it, or it's Goyim in some cases, you can't ignore that and act like there wouldn't be any sort of business nepotism that would explain some portion of the disproportionality of why they corner certain markets, because they only hire each other. It's not the race that's the problem, it's the racism that's the problem. But you're not allowed to notice the racism or you get called a racist. It's insane. I mean, they're the ultimate, to steal from this comedian, they're the ultimate Karen. Because what does a Karen do when they get called racist? They deflect and then they accuse you and they cry. And so it's like they're sitting there going, "Oh, I saw a Free Palestine sticker. I think I'm oppressed." Please. And they
But
bomb apartments.
that is an extremely low metric for oppression, seeing a Free Palestine sticker. I
Have you
was
seen the
raised
guys that like go, "Oh, did you hit me with a flag?" And they like curl up in a ball. Nobody touched them.
I've seen a bunch of those
Stop
compilations,
oppressing me.
unfortunately. Yeah, they're on TikTok, which I'm sure is not going to get any pushback from the Israeli lobby and try to become outlawed or anything. How ridiculous is this? It's hard enough to find these atrocities on YouTube. You can find them on TikTok. And
You
foreign
can't.
policy experts like Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute, like
Just
John
had
J.
them on.
Mearsheimer, are constantly saying, like, this TikTok ban makes total sense if we look back at a book titled the Israel Lobby and American Foreign Policy by John Mearsheimer. We're talking about
And
how
Steve
much
Holt
they
too.
completely, yes, thank you. His name wasn't coming to mind. As far as how this TikTok ban got so much power, mostly out of nowhere. It was talked about briefly under Trump, but the fact that they were able to push this through, tie it to Ukraine funding and an increase in Israel funding, as they're talking about how inherently evil Vladimir Putin is for no good reason, trying to be Hitler 2.0. They're
Unprovoked.
that they're funding this mass murder campaign all under the guise of, well, October 7th was really bad. They always say if China has a blockade around Taiwan, that's a declaration of war. But Israel has like a 20-year blockade on Gaza. Well, nothing to look into. They're actually
Meshuggah.
just protecting themselves if you think about it.
Ted Cruz and Mitt Romney said the quiet part out loud about, well, on TikTok, there's anti-Israel propaganda. Like,
Nikki
okay.
Haley said, every hour a child becomes 17% more anti Semitic on TikTok. Who
She's
is
doing that
running
George
this?
Bush fuzzy math.
She said that on the presidential debate stage when the Republican nominees were debating amongst each other. She said this without the slightest bit of irony. And then
6
the other
hours
day
later,
she's
what happens?
yeah, exactly. And then she's like signing. Did you see her signing bombs? This actually
I
looked like
did.
it was a legit thing. Okay,
I thought
I
it was
saw it and
just
I go,
some
"That's
one of
fake."
these settlers, but it was Nikki Haley. Might as well
It
be a settler.
it looked like it was her. It said, "Finish them, America, heart Israel." My gosh, the justification these people will give for the chosen people committing
That
mass
was the
murder.
UN ambassador. A top to
Yeah.
possibly, because this is really like, I might be saying Japanese. I forgot the term. Come see, come saw, whatever. I struggle with which is worse, her or John Bolton. That's a tough one because that's about as pro-Israel as you can get. The two of them.
John
She's more
Bolton,
annoying, but I
he
don't know, man.
he's he
They're the same
seems
height.
like he seems like he has read more white papers and has some more connections. I think Nikki Haley might be worse because she's more likable to the average person. I don't see any average voter getting motivated by John Bolton. Unfortunately, I saw
She
very
might be
nice
more
people.
dangerous. Yeah. Yeah.
I see very nice people say,
But
"I don't
he's
know,
not gonna
Trump is
get a
bad, but I like Haley. She seems reasonable. She wants to
well,
defend us
Bolton's
and
not
whatnot."
going for the voted in position, he's going for the
Yeah.
appointed in bureaucrat position, like like the
Did you hear him
entire
say,
OSP, you know?
yeah, he was asked, You didn't vote for Biden or Trump, what'd you do? And did you just, abstain?" He goes, "I voted for Dick Cheney, and I'm gonna do it again." He wrote in Dick Cheney.
Of course.
Um,
Darth Cheney. He's
there's an
half man,
amazing
half robot.
document There's an amazing document by it was Paul Wolfowitz, referred to as the Wolfowitz Doctrine, titled 1992 Defense Planning Guidance. This was when
It's planning
Cheney
guidance strategy.
was Secretary of Defense. I think this had to have been. Um, and it talks about how there's one primary focus which the U.S. military needs to focus on, and it's not preserving the freedoms. It's not the Bill of Rights. It's not preserving democracy and then spreading it by leading by example. It's preventing another rival superpower. In the most blatant, realist terms you could ever imagine. This, to the credit of, I think, the New York Times is the one who leaked this in the 90s. It is just unbelievable to see how these people talk behind closed doors. It is
They wrote
explicitly about
personal
this.
letters to Bill Clinton to see the defense planning guidance also, and it really, if you take that paper, like the core theme of it, what ended up being uh the magnus opus for PNAC, for strategies for securing the realm. It was the same people. Wolfowitz is part of that as well. And it was the same theme: how to prevent any threats to U.S. military or economic hegemony. And by U.S., they mean Israel.
That unfortunately, that I it always seemed
Rebuilding America's defenses.
when I was first interested in politics, it's like, well, America calls the shots, and Israel is sort of like an American colony. They're the small country, and America's the big dog. The more you look into it, it is amazing, and we see
No,
this
no. Israel's the
constantly.
dog. America's the teeth. Not the tail, the
Yeah.
teeth. Yeah.
That is interesting. We see this all the time where very small minorities control a very large population. What do you think Congress is? 535 people have a lot more power than 330 million other people who are Americans. So we do see this play out in reality. It's not like they're so small they can't control something so big. No, it constantly happens. And in this case, the more you look into it, it certainly seems like Israel is calling the shots. Like Netanyahu is a little more influential than
Oh, he got
Joe Biden.
55 standing ovations. When's the last time? And this was when during the Obama regime, he wasn't even there. Netanyahu stood before Congress and got 55 standing ovations with all his rhetoric. And I like George Carlin's take on Congress. If con is, because the opposite of con is pro. So the opposite of Congress is progress.
Yeah. Constantly tying the strings around our neck, making it extremely costly to do business interactions in the voluntary sector. Try building something in a blue state. Very difficult. Sending billions to the Banderites in Ukraine.
What's
Well, we got
that
to make
book?
that
Everything
easy.
I want to do is illegal or something. I can't believe
Yeah.
it. It's something like that.
Of course. Yep. Funding a high tech mass murder campaign in Gaza. Well, that check needs to be written immediately.
Yeah.
People engaging in voluntary commerce. Well, we got to go through some steps here. You got to fill out these papers. You got to wait for a return call. It's amazing how they have vilified producers and put these parasites up on such a pedestal.
Well, they tax the productive to subsidize the non-productive.
Yes.
If you pay people not to work, then they won't. But I have another question about what happened with the Libertarian Party this week. What is
So,
that creature?
So what happened was they had their annual convention in Washington, D.C. Angela McArdle invited Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to speak. Joe Biden did not accept, but the others did. Joe Biden came. That was Joe Biden came. Donald Trump joined them, gave a speech which was met with a lot of boos. One person had to be taken out. Trump said, "Turns out I was a libertarian without even trying." And he quotes from an article written as to why libertarians should support the presidency of Donald Trump. He mentions criminal justice reform. He mentions no new wars under my administration, first and forever. Mentions a lot of these things. So after all this
He got
time,
out of the
they
Paris Accords. He lowered corporate tax rates, so he's a little bit. Yeah.
yeah he did all of
He
those
also
very predictable
assassinated
things.
Soleimani and attacked Syria twice. And yeah.
Yeah, and he actually bragged when he was giving an address to Congress. He goes, "This woman, stand up. Her husband died in a very important intelligence operation in Yemen." And I'm sitting next to a guy. He goes, "We're in Yemen?" And it was just unbelievable to see. It's weird that Trump said that. He said those exact words, that he died. There were like 18 civilians killed in there, in just that one operation. Yemeni civilians, of course. That's
No, of
why we've
course.
heard so little about it. Um, so that happened. They then voted on who their candidate for president would be. A man named Chase Oliver was victorious. He beat out a member of the LP Mises Caucus, Michael Rechtenwald. So it looks like after a lot of effort from the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus to put up someone who attempts to stand on principle, to really focus on issues that matter. Unfortunately, someone who is much more passionate about social justice activism is the one who was victorious.
It's just we went from Russell Means and Ron Paul to this thing that
So it's
yeah,
like
wants
so,
open
so Scott
borders and
Horton
dildos.
So Scott Horton gave a speech at the LP convention and said, "I'm so proud that all of the nominees were very good on peace and war," and and that was very nice to hear. So one of the main metrics that the LPMC and someone like myself uses is, you can say you're against something. People like Sam Cedar will say, "I'm anti-war." Bill Kristol said in his debate with Scott Horton, "Even I'm anti-war. I just try
Michael
to do
Ledeen
military."
anti-war. Michael Ledeen. The
Any
Bill
of them.
Crystal thing, what took is the dumbest one though. Like that is just so hilarious.
That I really envy that man's confidence. I wish more people like like us were as confident, just as blindly confident. I can say this without irony and tons of booze. It's like, wow, just very
Well, that's a
impressive.
good metric as far as war and peace goes. Like you can't do what you want to do domestically if you don't stop spending trillions of dollars on imperial escapades.
Exactly. And you
However,
either have to tax the population, very unpopular, or you have to increase the money supply, which makes all dollars that the population currently holds worth less and less and less as you drastically increase the money supply. So when these fucking idiots like Ben Shapiro think they're so cool to say, "Well, I think America needs to be tough and stand strong." Well, there is a great deal of history where empires fell as a causal result of being involved in too many wars. The Tsarist Russian Empire lost more than 1 million people before the Bolsheviks had enough numbers to overtake the Tsarist regime. They brag about how the Soviets fell because they overexpanded into Afghanistan. The British and French fell after a long time of expansion. Kaiser Wilhelm's Second Reich failed after he declared war on France and Russia. We're constantly seeing these empires fall. The Ottoman Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire declaring war on Serbia and not surviving the First World War. So it's completely ridiculous to say we're strong and tough and we care about America, so we advocate war. Wars are constantly weakening nations to a point where they're not able to return. So no, the
these
neocons are
wars are
not
not
so
even in
tough
the
and cool.
national interest. It's not
Oh,
even in the
exactly.
national interest. It's like you're just going to war for Israel. You went to war in Iraq for Israeli interests. You put
Oh, yeah.
sanctions on Iran for Israeli interests. You sponsored an Al Qaeda proxy war in Syria for Israel. That doesn't
I
serve
remember
the United States.
I remember
It doesn't
Netanyahu.
hurt the U.S.'s main competitors to increase the price of oil if they're oil exporters. It's
Sure.
just profiteering. It's just there for select commercial interests, and the Israelis even have the most powerful lobby, and that's how the government actually works. It's just based on bribery. It's like the whole state of New York.
I remember Netanyahu speaking with Congressman Dennis Kucinich, and Kucinich just tried to build him a dam to fall inside if he goes, are there any other regimes you think we should overthrow? And Netanyahu says, well, as I mentioned, Saddam in Iraq, the Gaddafi's regime in Libya, and also Iran. Now, on many other occasions, of course, they support overthrowing Bashar al-Assad, as Barack Obama came out and said Assad and Gaddafi are no longer legitimate leaders. But to see these people claim it before it happens, knowing
Hmm.
that it's in the interest of the Israeli elite and many of the weapons manufacturing companies, this is the important freedom economic insight where some people are benefiting at the expense of others. It's not like everyone's just losing and we shouldn't be in these wars. There are people benefiting, but it's not the average person in the country. It's a select few who are benefiting at the expense of
Yeah,
others.
people get the quote wrong that I think it's Smedley Butler. It says war is the health of the state. By the state, they don't mean all the people that live in that country. State just means the government employees. It's the health of they make money at our expense. War costs more than what you gain from it. You're spending trillions of dollars on these death machines, missiles and things. It's like $1 million cruise missile. Once it's blown up, you can't use it again. It's gone. It's just the money's just gone. It creates mass inflation. But for the people, the insider traders in Congress that are buying into Lockheed Martin stock and then going and picking a fight, giving them cover contracts, it's health for their well-being. I don't like it being called the state, like war is health of the government or something. People think the state means like, oh, we started war to fix the economy. It doesn't fix the economy. It makes the economy worse. It just fixes the little bubble of the economy around DC profiting off of terrorism and death. And in that Netanyahu speech you're referring to, he actually said, I promised it would have positive reverberations after taking out Iraq and Saddam Hussein. And it was all he's got these weapons. He's got this nuclear program. Then they said Iran has the nuclear program. They said the weapons were moved to Syria. Judith Miller actually said that. She said Iraq's WMDs
That's
were moved to Syria. And she quoted Paul Wolfowitz, Richard Pearl, and anonymous Israeli security officials. Like, oh, yeah,
right.
a bunch of Zionist Jews. Great. Yeah, they're so honest.
the the most reliable of all. Yeah, when also in that testimony, Netanyahu makes this bizarre analogy. He goes, just as in retail, the important things are location, location, location. In the war on terrorism, it's about winning, winning, winning. The first victory makes the next victory that much more likely. So he's basically bragging about how the more democracy we bring, the more democracy will flourish. But after a 20-year war against the Taliban, they took Kabul in 11 days after trillions of dollars, tens of thousands of civilian lives. Then, of course, the disaster in Iraq, which is just ridiculous for people to. It's so unpopular at this point to even use it as an example. But then you have what happened in Libya, where slave markets took over
Yeah.
after you had the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group now
We
calling the
made
shots
slavery great again.
in
Exactly.
in in many of the cities. You had groups like Jabhat al-Nusra drastically increasing in their power and influence after the war against Assad's government in Syria. So they're wrong on every single count, time and time again.
They keep doing the lies. It seems to be less effective since the Iraq War, although they did invade Libya. A lot of the Europeans did that too. But in Syria, they couldn't quite get the boots on the ground. They couldn't pull it off. And I think it's because they lied so much about Iraq that people just weren't having it. Like, you're not going to do this. And they couldn't do the Libya model with a bunch of airstrikes and then have the Al Qaeda come in on the ground, because Syria had the fifth best air defense systems in the world at the time. They put all their eggs in one thing: shoot down planes, because they knew how the U.S. would operate and what they would do. That they can't have skin on the game. That they won't come in on the ground because they'll lose too many soldiers. But they'll blow everything up and then they'll send in the hordes. So because they couldn't get in that way, they financed, like you said, Jabhat al-Nusra, HTS, Aral al-Sham, FTS, all these little ISIS groups, ISIS affiliates, and had them try to do it. And it almost worked. They were winning in around 2013. It was very close. Russia gets into the war, starts bombing the caravans, and turned everything around. By 2017, they had taken back pretty much everything except for that Idlib inside Afrin, and then the U.S. has its little base in Al Tanf, which is kind of in Jordan too, as we saw recently that it got hit.
That's right. I saw that.
Yeah, and then
Um,
they responded by just blowing up stuff in Iraq. Like what? It's
yes.
just like 9/11. Let's
Mm.
invade Iraq. They have anything to do with it? No, but they're brown and they sound funny. So
Yeah, it's unfortunately an easy target to pick on. Uh, Congressman Rand Paul actually had a interesting moment which he didn't capitalize on when he's asking Hillary Clinton questions under oath. He asked about were any of the weapons that were looted from Gaddafi's regime sent to Turkey, and she just plays beyond dumb. Turkey. That's so weird. We never even mentioned Turkey. I don't know what this is about. It seems very clear that the evidence was there were weapons from Gaddafi's regime going to Turkey and then being funneled to groups like Jabhat al-Nusra, al-Qaeda
yeah,
in Syria
there
to
was a
fight
ship in
against the Bashar
Lebanon that was
al-Assad regime.
commandeered.
Th-
Yeah.
they have a war on terrorism, and they're almost explicitly engaged in fighting these very terrorists they pretend to be protecting us from.
Well, it's interesting too. The Israelis have never attacked ISIS. They
Yeah.
exclusively attack the Syrian government. And sometimes it would come in tandem. The Israelis would do an airstrike, and then Al Qaeda would move in on the ground, almost like they were working together. But I thought it's wow, and they see it as well. Hezbollah is on the side of Assad, so they think that Hezbollah is a greater threat than Al Qaeda. So they will arm and support and do airstrikes on their behalf. They're
The,
helping
He-
Al-Nusra for
Hezbollah
the head chopping lunatics. But then again, Israel's a bunch of head chopping lunatics. I mean, they're the Jewish ISIS. They burn babies, they cut off heads, they blow up apartments, they bomb hospitals, they run into hospitals in the West Bank and assassinate people who are in their beds. I mean, how are they different than ISIS?
yeah,
Besides, they get money directly, overtly instead of covertly, I guess.
There was an amazing exchange with Joe Scarborough and an Israeli spokesman where he had said, "Are Hamas are Nazis, right?" And he goes, "Yes, absolutely. October 7th confirms that." And he goes, "Well, why did Benjamin Netanyahu send the head of Mossad to Qatar soon before October 7th and tell them to authorize funds to Hamas?" And the more you look into this, a place like the Jerusalem Post, Times of Israel have reported on this. There was actually an explicit plan to support Hamas as the radical faction so the Netanyahu regime could say, we do not have a partner for peace. Look at Hamas. The PA, well,
Right.
they're only there because Abbas is, not giving elections. Hamas would take them over too. So we have no partner for peace. Now, a point that Dave Smith made very
Hamas
clear
is
in his
Fuentes
debate.
for the
Yeah,
ADL. It's
it.
like let's finance the
Mhm.
lunatics, because then like with Yitzhak Rabin, there was almost, and it was a sort of a shit deal, but it was almost a little bit of a deal where Palestine would start getting authority over their territory. We can't have that, so they propped up and funded Hamas to offset the PLO, so they wouldn't have to deal with anybody that outside community could look at as legitimate. But
And
then
this is
I
what
also think
Hillary
people
Clinton.
voted for Hamas because they tried everything else and they just get kicked around all the time. So after a while, it's just like a lot of American Indian groups. They all became warrior societies after enough outside pressure. And they didn't start that way, but they all ended up that way just to survive. And that's sort of how I see Hamas as both those things. Yeah, Israel is giving them money, but also what else are these people supposed to do? They've tried every type of negotiation there is, and they always get lied to and double crossed, and they're still annexing land and stealing houses, and they've got a wall built around them. So yeah, they start to gravitate towards, well, let's be violent. Nothing else is working.
According to the WikiLeaks document, Hillary Clinton's team had a strategy referred to as the Pied Piper strategy, where they said Ted Cruz and Ben Carson and even Rubio are relatively likable. We should put a big focus on Trump because Trump is someone who we want to run against because Trump we could easily beat. Now, of course, they were wrong about that
How'd that go?
in 2016. It is referred to as the Pied Piper strategy. WikiLeaks, you can find these documents. So this is very common in politics for one group to fund certain aspects of the opposition, which they see as very profitable. It's like anytime they mention um, Trump, it's almost immediately attached to January 6th, and they still lie. Merrick Garland came out and said all of the officers who were killed that day, or all the 5 officers who died. There was one officer, Brian Sicknick, who died days later in unrelated events. The only person that was killed was Ashley Babbitt by Officer Michael Byrd. A black officer murdered an unarmed white woman. Do not expect a trial. Don't worry, it's not going to be any wall-to-wall coverage
Right.
anytime soon from the press. But
She
yeah,
wasn't
this
even
is
on
very common.
fentanyl. She needed more drugs in her system. Can't
Oh,
get a
she's not
story.
getting a statue. She's not getting a
Yeah, she's not
statue.
getting a stat. You got to be hyped up on meth and fentanyl and about to drive a car. Then,
Mm.
after robbing a store with counterfeit money.
It's
Then
amazing
you get attention.
how pathetic it is to see that George Floyd is someone who has been heroized by the left at all.
Of
It's
all the
like, do they have
actual, like,
so
legit
few options?
cases.
It's
Yeah,
like Norman
exactly.
Norman Finkelstein's one of the most brilliant human beings who's ever gotten in front of a microphone. You build a statue to him, I'll applaud it. I could even maybe replace some of the statues that they're not too happy about, and give one to Finkelstein. But no, now they gotta say George Floyd. That's who you're looking up to. There's great progress. Jimmy Dore is a great progressive
Give
who
give one to
I
the
was going
guy
to
that
have.
invented yoga pants.
Would that have been a leftist? I'd have to look into the origins of that. But uh,
Actually, that's coming back to hurt us now with the way they're basically dressing up in their underwear in these gyms, and then there's fat chicks that wear it too. So I guess it all evens out. But yeah,
and then Lizzo heard
there are
about him.
people on the
Damn it!
left like that. I mean, Blumenthal, Max Blumenthal and Aaron, they're kind of on the left. That Kucinich, who you mentioned earlier, there are people there who are sane for leftist. Yeah, it'd be great. I don't know about statue worthy, but you know,
Mm.
I can work with all these people. Anyone that's against these pointless wars. I don't think like being anti-war is a left-right thing. It's a common sense thing. Like, why would you want to murder people for nothing? And it is for nothing because they're just lying to you all the time. We haven't had a just war for a very long time. And
This was
from
one of
from at least Vietnam to now, it's just all been rhetoric and bullshit.
This was one of the great points that Patrick J. Buchanan made in a book titled A Republic Not an Empire, published in 1999, and Churchill, Hitler, and the Unnecessary War. He said, well, just looking historically, it was a Democratic president who pushed us into the First World War.
Yep.
Lusitania was sunk in 1915. He's reelected in 16, declares war against Germany in April of 1917. Franklin Roosevelt in the Second World War. Major
Democrat.
escalations in Korea and Vietnam under Democrats. Nixon ran on ending
I'll call
the
those both
conflict in
wars, the
Vietnam.
Korean War, the Vietnamese War.
Oh, yes, yes.
I mean, come on. Oh, it's a
Yes,
police action. Like, well, really, with helicopters and tanks and everything. Like,
yeah.
the Korean War is a war for sure.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So there is a history of not just, well, Republicans are pro-war. That seems very new, not to,
Big
say
ones, World
psychopath
War
class.
One, World War Two, Korea and
Mhm.
Vietnam were all Democrats,
Yeah, exactly. So that is an attempt to build a golden bridge to retreat across for a lot
as
of
was
people who
Libya
are.
and
Uh, oh yes, Libya, of course as well.
bombing
Uh,
Serbia
so,
and so
so
on.
a lot
Yeah.
of Republicans who feel that it's in their DNA to be, supporting every war. That is much more recent, and there are many examples to the contrary that you can point at historically. Um, so yeah, that is just very important to keep in mind. It's not even necessarily a left-right thing. It's something both sides can look at points in their history or points in their contemporary claims as to why we should oppose this thing. And Pat Buchanan was basically saying the conservative values law, order, and civilization, and war is the antithesis of civilization. He mentions the fact that it was
Yeah.
actually Churchill who declared war against Germany along with France September 3rd of
Churchill is Britain's
1939.
Lincoln. He's
Uh,
so unfairly
only you
heroicized when
could
he ought to
really.
be demonized. Like, because he destroyed the British Empire. I mean, maybe we should build a statue of Churchill because he destroyed them and handed the torch to us, but he was awful. World War II could have been prevented without a like 75 million people getting killed. but this guy is looked at as just like this saint or something. He made all the wrong decisions, and he got all these people murdered, and he ended up losing the British Empire. So it was like, good job.
Yeah,
And
and
he's like
in
following astrology and stuff. The dude was not.
yeah,
Maybe he's not as bad as Lincoln, but he's terrible.
he might have been following astrology. In April of 1933, he actually spoke to Parliament and said, "One of the most important things we need to do is correct this issue of the Polish corridor. You have 95% of people in Danzig are German, who are an oppressed Polish minority. That land should go back to Germany." And then this was the justification for the declaration of war. I said Churchill declared war. Neville Chamberlain is the one who declared war on September 3rd, 1939, under the guise of Polish independence being violated. So the war for Poland left millions of Poles dead and left Poland in the hands of Stalin after years of the war. It was Churchill who initiated bombing of civilians in May of 1940 at the behest of Frederick Lindemann. This was a civilian bombing project that they did as a scorched earth policy in
We
hopes of
should
getting
mention
Germans
that
to
the
flee.
Polish attacked German-speaking areas of Czech Republic prior to September 39.
Yes, is that what Sunday, Bloody Sunday is referred to as? Is that the one they call it? I get those names mixed up, but yes, my
I
mistake.
mix up
Churchill did not
nicknames too,
declare
but I
war.
think
It was
you're
it
right.
was Chamberlain. Um, yes. So
But
fighting
that's the
for
other thing. They're all like, you don't want to be Neville Chamberlain. Like,
he's the one who
you
declared
want
war.
you hate him and you like Churchill. Well, interesting.
Just absolutely bizarre. So when Mr. I love Taiwan so much, I think we should play tough with China. Just like if you love Poland, make sure you don't have an empire giving them guarantees so the generals have an incentive to play tough with other countries, knowing they have the British Empire behind them. Same thing with Taiwan. You're not being Mr. Nice
Yeah.
Guy. You're
If
not
you love
doing Ukraine.
Taiwan, don't mess with China. Like, you're gonna
Exactly.
lose Taiwan. Bring weapons there.
If you love the replacement government of Ukraine, you just hated Yanukovych. Well, you might not want to push too much with Poroshenko and Zelensky. Just because you have the U.S. behind you, it doesn't make you the nice guy to push for war in these countries, because it gives a few people the incentive to play tough against others. Zelensky is more famous than almost anyone else on the planet right now. He's benefiting at the
Oh,
expense of all the
do you
dead
remember
Ukrainians, all the conscripted Ukrainians.
like 2022, Zelensky became the new Dr. Fauci because back
Yes.
during the hysteria of Rona for the plebs, Fauci was like, it was like Saint Fauci. You know, they had pillows with his face on it and stuff, and he was like, "I'm like
Candles.
more handsome than Brad Pitt." Like, no, you're not. But he just is so full of himself, and it was like the hero, and people had to get an ouchie for Fauci, and it was just all this. They made a commercial out of him, you know, songs and stuff, SNL skits, and just Dr. Fauci. It's just, they did the
Give
Mr.
us your
Sandman
vaccine.
song. Yeah, give us a jab. It was awful. And then Zelensky came. This is prior to green t-shirt Zelensky. It was like green hoodie Zelensky, where it was just all this outpour gushing. Zelensky became the new hero on the hill, replaced Fauci. It's like, oh, it's Zelensky season now. It just shows you the manipulation. There's still these dumbasses with Ukraine flags in their Twitter bios and stuff. This guy, this is funny. Today, he listed all the people like in Trump's cabinet. He's like felon, 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 felon. And he's got a Ukraine flag in his bio. I thought, you're talking about government corruption and felons, and you have a Ukraine flag in your bio, a country run by billionaire oligarchs that appointed themselves governors. They didn't even have elections.
It's just so pathetic. You think you're pro-Ukraine for pushing them into a war which involves conscription and kidnapping, and Zelensky's no-leave policy, all men ages 18 to 65, which he initiated in
Except for
February
Jews.
of 22.
They're allowed to go to Israel.
I was not aware of that caveat. I will have to look into it. But they think they're pro a country because they want to push it into mass war, which is like completely unwinnable, almost explicitly used to weaken the Russians, just as they tried
I
to
heart
weaken the Soviets.
Ukraine to the last Ukrainian, not to the last Ukrainian. No.
to the very last Ukrainian, which people like Mitt Romney say it's one of the cheapest wars ever. Lindsey Graham says Russians are dying, and that's a good thing. Mitt Romney says there haven't been any official American lives. Some Americans have gone over, but it's not like it was at the direction of the president, allegedly. Whatever.
Lindsey
This is what
Graham.
they're pushing.
Lindsey Graham eats fried chicken with a fork. You get my drift.
That's funny. Lindsey Graham is just beyond
He's that
psychotic.
kind of guy. He drinks bottled water with an extended pinky.
That's probably better than anything empirical that what we could say about him. Just tag
There's
him with
metadata,
that.
man. Metadata's a thing. He's in South Carolina. So if you sat down and started eating fried chicken with a knife and fork, you're a little curved. I'd say queer as a football bat, but you know.
Yeah, these people are absolute monsters. And then anyone who wants to advocate for peace or negotiation, this is the great contradiction. They say you could never appease, or you're like Neville Chamberlain, even though Chamberlain declared war, never appease when people violate your freedoms. So the immediate follow-up is, so if the American government ever violates my freedom, I shouldn't appease them. I should declare something against them.
Annexing territory from the German state to award to other people who don't even speak German also be an act of violence, not appeasal? I mean, aren't they not appeasing you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but Putin's not appeasing. Who do you think he is, Neville Chamberlain? You must really like this guy.
He did appease for a long time.
Yes, he did.
He really did not want this war at all, and tried to negotiate right in the beginning. And Boris Johnson went and we went over that when I was on your show. But like, yeah, he went and put the kibosh on that. He said, "Don't worry, the Americans will back you." So, and now it's like, I don't know, 500,000 dead Ukrainian men later. And what do you have to show for it? You lost Zaporozhye, some of Kherson, and then old Donbass, Luhansk and Donetsk. And I don't know, you might end up losing Kharkiv. I heard there's a 300,000 man army in addition to the front line in northern Russia, right there, ready to go to Kharkiv. And it's just, dude, just surrender it. You're going to lose it anyway. Let's not have everyone die. Let's try that. I don't know. Zelensky, though, he doesn't care. It's not his people. He doesn't have a people. He's for himself. And the money, this is the best or worst. And this is according to people like Larry Johnson, I think Ray McGovern too. They were supposed to build all these defenses, like bunkers and trenches and stuff, I guess, dragon teeth and whatnot, north of Kharkiv. It wasn't done. There's piles of dragon teeth just all in one spot. They didn't even put them out to try and slow down the armored division. All this money they got just went up Zelensky's nose. The oligarchs are just buying homes in foreign countries and stuff. It was earmarked like, I don't know what they do. Build some trenches, fortify them with concrete, get some bunkers underground, whatever. Put up some barbed wire, minimal, nothing. And they just 3 brigades just walk right in. No landmines. That's a big one. They didn't have to demine it because there weren't any mines. And they definitely had the money to make them. So where did it go? It went to FTX and then it went back to the DNC. That's what happened.
Exactly. It went to the Nancy Pelosi needed to re-up the implants, I think. So maybe it's good that the FTX money.
Are her eyebrows on the back of her head yet?
Probably. I haven't checked.
Too much stretching her face.
She's
one of the most brilliant. Warren Buffett ought to ask her for advice. She's one of those brilliant inside trade. Stockbrokers ever. She can't lose. Yeah.
Well, reminds me of the Clintons. They're just public servants who run a charity.
Mm-hmm.
They're not in it for money.
The
also, they're some of the wealthiest people on the planet and have more power than all of us combined. But they're just public servants who run a charity. There's nothing big at all.
We're just really good at picking stocks, man. Don't be jelly.
Oh my gosh, they're brilliant.
We have a shit balloon chat. We used to call them shekel chats, but somebody sends in 10 shit balloons. If you don't know about the shit show yesterday between North Korea and South Korea, go back one video. It is epic. But D. Wesley G says, fuck Israel, fuck Anthony Blinken, fuck Lincoln, fuck Lindsey Graham, fuck Zelensky, and they are evil scumbags, and fuck RFK. I assume you mean Junior. He is a turd sandwich. Give Jimmy Dore a tweet on X, dude. I did. He said he'd have me on the show, but he said that before, so I'll see if he follows through. I think
Jimmy
he
also
does
said
want
that to
me,
me.
but he's a little bit scared because it's me. But I mean, I know how to pump the brakes on when if it's YouTube. I'm like, okay, I know not this, right? We know.
Yeah.
Did he
Yeah,
get approach you as well?
Jimmy said that he would have me on the show as well. I met him at the Tempe Improv with my colleague at the Libertarian Institute, Connor Freeman, and he had a Q&A where he only took one question, my question. I asked him if he would advocate. He's really about empowering the masses. I said, "Would you advocate decriminalizing all capitalist acts between consenting adults?" He thought about it and said, "Are you talking about prostitution? You're probably one of these libertarians that got a big laugh line." But after the show, I told him, "Hey, here's what I do. Here's who I work with. Would you have me on the show?" He goes, "Definitely. Here's an email, like info at door or something." And I sent an email, have not heard back yet, but he was gone for a while. Craig Pasta took over. I haven't looked at the show recently, but I still think Jimmy Dore is a
Well,
certainly a
if I
net
get
benefit.
on, I will recommend you too. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Well,
Have you been
I
on
would
with the
just
judge? He's been dipping in
no,
that circle. Well,
no,
there you
I
go.
haven't. I
Next
had
time
a
I'm on
plan.
there, I'll give a recommendation too. If I go on there again, I
I
was they caught me when I was traveling. They caught me again when I was traveling, and the second time I said no. Wait till I get back. Then the judge was traveling, so I was like, should have just said yes. But there's plenty going on in the world, that's for sure. See if there's other
there
questions
there certainly is.
here.
Um, one thing that your audience might find interesting, I don't know how many times I've gotten into this story. I was raised Jewish. I was bar mitzvahed. I went to temple and everything. And this Israel Palestine thing is one of the more recent things I have changed my mind about. I more or less had the Dennis Prager worldview of how this
Mm,
situation's going on. I was intrigued to see a remote control machine gun in Max Blumenthal's book titled The 51 Day War, where it's a remote controlled machine gun pointing to the civilians in Gaza. And it got me very interested in maybe there's another side to this. So, the thing that really changed things for me was this document right here, written in 1923. It's called The Iron Wall by Zeev Jabotinsky, one of the founders of the Irgun terrorist movement, along with Stern and Haganah. This later became
how
the
can I?
Israeli Defense Forces. But in 1923, he wrote this: colonization of Palestine, agreement with Arabs impossible at present, and Zionism must go forward. Here's a couple quotes that woke me up to the importance of this situation. Thought your audience might appreciate this. There can be no voluntary agreement between ourselves and the Palestine Arabs. My readers have a general idea of the history of colonization in other countries. I suggest they consider all the precedents which with we are acquainted and see whether there is one solitary instance of any colonization being carried out with the consent of the native population. There is no such precedent. The native population, civilized or uncivilized, have always stubbornly resisted the colonists, irrespective of whether they are civilized or savage. They feel the same instinctive, jealous love of Palestine as the old Aztecs felt for ancient Mexico and the Sioux for their rolling prairies. Contempt for the Arab people. It means they despise the Arab race if they think that they will come to an agreement, which they regard as a corrupt mob that could be bought and sold, and are willing to give up their fatherland for a good railway system. Every native population in the world resists colonists as long as it has the slightest hope of being able to rid itself of the danger of being colonized. He goes on like this later, saying, "There's only one
The
thing the
level of
Zionists want."
racism in that too. He's like,
Oh, yeah.
because he thinks of everything framed in race, everyone else does. It's like,
Yeah.
no, they just don't want their personal property taken away. Their kids being shot.
Exactly, and that's what Ergon Stern and Haganah, talk about. I condemn Hamas. Well, there's other terrorist organizations. You have the Deir Yassin massacre. You have the bombing of the King David Hotel. This Levon affair, attempted false flag, the USS Liberty. So they're
The
certainly
Levant
throwing
affair
a lot
should
of.
be called Operation Susanna because Pinhas Levant was actually the fall guy. He didn't orchestrate that. Benjamin Gavili did the whole Levant affair thing with Philip
And,
Mason
and then
Joseph.
one final section from this. It's only like 7 pages. I recommend people read it. There is only one thing the Zionists want, and it is that one thing that Arabs do not want, for that is the way by which the Jews would generally become the majority, and then a Jewish government would follow automatically, and the future of the Arab minority would depend on the goodwill of the Jews. The Zionists want only one thing, Jewish immigration, and this Jewish immigration is what Arabs do not want. So this is basically the explicit case for
Yep.
imperialism, colonialism, violently dominating people under an iron wall, not just some lunatic, founder of the Jewish Defense League in Odessa, Russia, founder of Ergon, and a very influential writer in the later years. This is actually what's happening. It's actually being put into effect, this ethnic cleansing operation in Gaza, as well as these settlements in the
The
West Bank.
first, second, and sixth prime ministers of Israel were all Irgun terrorists.
Yeah, so that would have
And the
been
Jewish
Begin.
agency just becomes the government, and then they make another Jewish agency. But the JA, all those individuals, that just ends up from Palmach and Haganah, ended up becoming the first Israeli government. It's a bunch of terrorists. And then you mentioned like Deir Yassin. I mean, they beheaded 200 people in that massacre, put some other people in cages to parade around Jerusalem like a trophy. People like Einstein wrote against it because that village wasn't even involved in the Arab resistance. It was just an absolute slaughter.
It was amazing to hear
go
Dennis
that
Prager.
timeline. Prager?
to hear Prager say, you can't name anything on the scale of Hamas atrocities on the Israeli side. To which someone said, this was in his debate with Cenk Uygur and Dave Smith. They say, well, how about Deir Yassin? He goes, oh, that was so long ago. The guy who mentions Nazis every 10 seconds can't go back to 1948. Okay. Well, there's a series of operations which Max Blumenthal has heroically documented, referred to as mowings of the lawn, things like Operation Pillar of Defense, Operation Protective Edge, where there are
Run.
thousands of homes just destroyed, tons of civilians killed in these operations. And all we're supposed to say is, I condemn Hamas and October 7th was bad. It was, but that's not the universal metric. Especially if we're
2018.
being lectured to by the people who are
Yeah.
like, we're the chosen people, and God said, "Thou shalt not murder," and Hamas is bad. Well, there's no caveat to the "Thou shalt not murder" commandment, where only you people get to do it, and it's terrorism when anyone else does it. So I just wanted to share
They
that.
murdered 237 Palestinians in 2023 before October 7th. They kill them all
was
the
nice of them.
time. And there's
Yeah.
thousands injured, and I mean severely, like shot through the knee with rubber bullet, which is a metal bullet with some rubber on it. During the entire March for Peace, they were shooting them every Friday. They go out there and shoot kids, handicapped, a guy in a wheelchair, they blew his head off. That happens all the time. They put them on a calorie diet. I mean, babies are starving because there's no formula. They booby trapped some of the supplies. They shot people who went and gathered around the aid trucks. They bombed the aid trucks themselves. They've done every war crime you can imagine and some that you'd have to write down now. Like I asked this to Napolitano, and I asked this to everybody. When you approach a Zionist, do it like this. Not was X a war crime. Just say, is there anything Israel could do that would be considered a war crime? Like what? You tell me, what would count as a war crime? And then also, is there anything they could do that would count as offense? Because you always say they're defending themselves. So it's flying over with fighter jets and bombers and bombing people in their bedroom while they're asleep. Defense or offense? Because if that's defense, then what is offense? Like, what would offense be? They can't say it's impossible to have offense, but they have to say it's impossible to have offense. Because all the things we know are offense. They're going to be like, we have a right to exist and a right to defend themselves. Like, you already exist. You don't need a right to do that. But you're not defending yourselves. When they broke out of the wall and attacked you, why was there a wall around them in the first place? Yeah, how did you get there? You annexed all that territory through force. They are defending themselves from you.
You familiar with this research popularized by the New York Times? I don't know who originally came out with it, but there was a document circulating in Israeli intelligence titled Jericho Wall, I think Operation Jericho Wall, where they thought that this attack was going to happen, and they either didn't believe it or it was, there was an intentional stand down. You familiar with Jericho Wall and them having any foreknowledge about this?
I heard even like that the night before they said, oh, they put it off till tomorrow. But then around 6 a.m. is when they got hit. But there was definitely some intel. And I just find it hard to believe how there couldn't be because they were openly practicing outside, paragliders and everything. How could you not know? And Scott Ritter said that, because, government incompetence is also just as plausible, that they relied too heavily on AI. They got too arrogant about that. And they even held like symposiums about it and stuff. And Hamas went there and took, no, really? That's what you did? No, that was okay. Thank you. And so they had a Jewish holiday, which is like every other day. And so a lot of the like crack troops were gone. You had a bunch of 19-year-old women looking at the monitors and they just fuck about and don't, they're not doing their job. And we're asleep at the wheel. And they knew it. They're like, they'll be drunk. A lot of them are on vacation. This is the time to do this. Nobody, and there's cameras looking at them all the time. They have machine gun turrets on the wall. The women that were supposed to ring the alarm bell, not a single one of them did because they're all asleep. It's just, so many days go by with nothing happened, nothing happened, nothing happened. And they thought, well, they didn't do anything on Friday. Fridays, even they usually with Friday prayers. So they weren't expecting it Saturday morning. Like they watched it. All right, now we can go party. Da, da, da. And so it was just like them getting slack and thinking AI would be able to figure out when they're doing what. And it couldn't. But the real problem is the people who were posted to watch this, they found the most incompetent, like female teenagers for their defense, and they all failed. Now, was that on purpose? Because there is a lot of intelligence that apparently Egypt and some other states even warned them this is coming, and they didn't act. So that would be something though, because Netanyahu definitely needed an event to stay out of jail. But
Yeah, really.
they were provoking it. They flooded Alaska Mosque. Like they physically got in a bunch of rabbis and settlers and stuff and went into Alaska Mosque and performing Jewish rituals and stuff. And Hamas named their operation Alaska Flood
Mhm.
after this event. That was on October 4th and October 5th. 2 days later, they hit. They basically met on Friday, said it's on, tonight or whatever. And so in the wee hours of Saturday morning, they hit them. But man, Israel's going to have a hard time spending this because either they had a massive intelligence failure, which is not good for Netanyahu, or they're in on it, which is not good for Netanyahu outside of Israel, but good for him inside of Israel.
Yeah.
Because they
He
always want
thought
to
he could
pretext the
control the
Muslim.
height of the flame.
I think they just thought we'll flood the mosque, they'll fire some rockets, we'll go mow the lawn. They did not know that they would get through the wall with a tractor and a bomb and hit and overtake the Golani Brigade. They can't. What do they have? Well, it seemed like when they hit those Israeli bases, no one was even awake. Like they just went in and shot a couple guards, and they were getting out of their bunkers trying to get dressed because you can see the GoPro. They just kick in the door and just shot everybody in there. Well, those were soldiers, but they're not even in uniform. They didn't know what was going on, and they were able to overrun those Israeli bases because they're totally unprepared. There was no alarm going off, nobody, nothing. They just showed up, flew in with paragliders. Israeli police blocked off that concert they had in Negev. They put a roadblock. And so that's why you see all the cars, they veer off to the right and left of the road. That's where they're parked like this because the cops wouldn't let them flee. So they got stuck there in the crossfire between Hamas and the police. And then later the IDF come with their helicopters and just started Hannibal doctoring everybody. In fact, the Israelis killed more Israelis on October 7th than Hamas did.
I
The Israelis killed
I
more
saw that
Israelis
debate.
on October 7th than they've killed Hamas fighters.
I've heard competing sources on that. I saw Moin Rabbani and Norman Finkelstein unwilling to really commit to one side of that argument or another. I don't know the specifics.
But that
Just
was early on. Like now we
yeah,
have the charred remains of the cars. We have witnesses from the kibbutzes saying they fired on us with tanks. We're the only two. So it's known now. At first, it was like, oh, hey, yeah, I don't know. But
and for
it,
those wondering, this Jericho Wall source that I have, I just put it in the chat. It is from the New York Times. It says Israel knew Hamas's attack plan more than a year ago. A blueprint reviewed by the Times laid out the attack in detail. Israeli officials dismissed it as as aspirational and ignored specific warnings. That was just where I got the idea for those who might be interested.
yeah, well, they knew what the plan was going to be, but I'm saying they knew when it was going to be. Like they're like it's going to be soon, within days. And they thought, yeah, they could never. It's just the hubris. And I'm a little torn. I'm like, did they kind of let it happen on purpose and then react to it? It is Israel. I don't know. It's I can totally see that. But I can equally see government incompetence because that's just how governments are. You think everyone's like, why
It's
did they
gotta
shoot down all those planes on 9/11? I'm like, because it's the government. It's not what you see on TV. They're not super sharp. They couldn't even
oh,
translate Arabic. They had documents about the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, the plot. For 3 years, they had them just sitting there in plain Arabic, and nobody could read them.
oh
That's
yeah.
how incompetent it is. It's that bad. It wasn't even
And
like code. It was just Arabic. Just
and
Arabic.
incompetence can certainly get you killed. The U.S. military, I want to say it was in the 1960s, dropped a nuclear weapon in North Carolina, not necessarily to kill people in North Carolina. It just literally fell off of the plane. This, according to researching and documents, primary documents provided by the Daily Mail. I believe I originally saw this. But these accidents absolutely can happen. There were close calls with Soviet submarines in the 60s as well as the 80s, and turns out it was the sun falsely claiming that there was a nuclear explosion above this submarine. So these accidents absolutely can happen.
Yeah, one missing submarine that disappeared had nuclear material on board and ended up somewhere. But they had an F-35 crash in Arizona like just 3 days ago, 2 days ago, and that's happened more than once. But those do carry nukes sometimes, and they just fall. And like, what happened? Did it run into dust? Did it rain? Did it hit a shadow? Because the F-35 just seems to play tag with the ground more, and it's the most advanced and expensive one out there. And they crash not in warfare, just flying from somewhere to somewhere else. Pilot loses control and the plane goes into the ground. They lost a couple off the coast of Japan. They lost one in North Carolina too, or South Carolina. It like ghost flew. The pilot ejected and it just kept going by itself. They said, well, where is it? They didn't know until it fell and hit the ground. And some farmers are like, I think we found your plane. Yeah, is it that
So
where all the smoke's coming from?
one thing that just came to mind, were you surprised this would have been November 15th of 2022 when Zelensky came out and said Russia has just attacked Poland, a NATO ally, NATO needs to respond and, defend its reputation. Two Polish civilians have been killed. Russia just
Yeah,
bombed
that
them.
was an
And
S-300
then
system that hit. So
it,
what happened
it,
was,
And then
go ahead.
the only reason I'm asking is because we got quite a bit of silence from the State Department on this, whereas might have thought they said, "Yep, this was Putin. We're going to declare Article 5 again." They were extremely silent until Lloyd Austin came out and said, "It turns out it was a Ukrainian defense missile, but ultimately Putin is at fault." Did something? I got to say that took me by surprise a little. Did that surprise you at all? How those events unfolded?
Well, I asked Scott Ritter about that, and I asked Larry Johnson about that, and I asked Andre Martinyanov because those three have different knowledge about different things, but they were pretty convinced that this is not, you can't accidentally fire an S-300 defense system at incoming missiles or whatever it is and have it go 180 degrees the wrong direction and hit another country. It's a really far arc and absolutely the wrong way. It could go, when you're firing this way, somewhere in here. It doesn't go like that, and it doesn't go up and that way for miles and miles until it lands on Poland. And there would have to be some sort of radar or something to attract it to go there. So that farm was tagged on purpose. They just sacrificed those people. In the history of that being used in the Syrian war, and because they've had S-200s, S-300s, and Russia uses them too. They have the S-400. You can't just go, oops, we hit Poland. It wasn't like right on the border either. So what were you firing at? They just let one fly so they could blame it on Russia. And it's what are you doing? I mean, why not just use just turn your own artillery around and fire on it? Because the S-300 is something they both use, I suppose. But it was a weird situation. It was a weird thing to use for a false flag, and yet it definitely was, because you physically can't happen that way. So he was just, I don't know, he was testing that. Say, well, Russia's attacked. They're not going to determine whether it was an S-300 or not. They're just going to say Russia hit it. We run the media. They'll say whatever we want. But I think NATO was like, no. You're the battering ram. You're the crash test dummy, Ukraine. We're not actually going to fight Russia. That's just mouth. And I think Russia from that point on knew that. They go, they're not coming in. I mean, there were some Polish mercenaries sent to Ukraine. That had already happened, but that's Russia had not attacked Poland. And if you were going to attack Poland, you're not going to send one missile and hit Poland. Like, that's your first strike capacity. If you're going to attack, you're going to attack, because then it's on. You're not going to waste your initiative and your first strike capacity by just firing one missile at one farm and then allowing them to respond. No nation would do that. If you're going to hit, you're going to hit them with everything all at once, because that's declaring war. So none of it made any sense other than Ukraine trying to attack Poland and blame it on Russia. That's all that was.
Yep. Certainly
They're
seems
really
like
bad liars, because they're so used to, well, the media will just say whatever we want. And they're not wrong, but social media won't. And from back then, there was no Elon Twitter. It was still Dorsey Twitter. So you could get away with that kind of crap. But you couldn't do that now. Not with Substack and Telegram and Twitter, even though it's still banny. It's way, way better than it was. And you could get that. I mean, they banned Ritter 3 times, I think. I just got banned, for years consecutively. There was no back and forth. Just, you're gone. But I got it back in 2023, so it's going well. But that's what we need, is free speech. If I just heard the Tucker Carlson interview with Jeff Sachs. Did you get a chance to hear it? It's really
I
good.
love him. Of course. I saw 2 hours and 26 minutes. I'm like, yeah, I
Right.
think I have time. Sachs is just brilliant on every
It's
aspect
great.
of this.
And I'm like, that's what we need. Like, not these 5-minute news segments. Let them cook, as the kids say. But
Mhm.
put Jeff Sachs and Larry Johnson and Ray McGovern and people like that, Lawrence Wilkerson, those type of people, and just let them talk for one day on the media about Ukraine, Gaza, all of it. Let that be the media just once, and this would all be over. Anybody that watched that, Jeff Sachs too. I mean, those kind of people, that's who you ought to be talking to, not Lloyd Austin, not General whoever, Paige Schill from the Synagogue. No, get the actual scholars on there. Like, I want to hear Nora Earhart and Grant Smith and Finkelstein and Max Blumenthal and Miko Peled, who's going to be on the show in about 11 hours. Those are the people who ought to be talking about Gaza. The people who know this in and out, been talking about it 30, 40 years. That's who we want. But we get what we get. What?
Sachs had a
Even if,
very interesting point about Haiti, that there was a coup in our hemisphere of a government bordering the Dominican Republic, the Haitian government. And when he called to tell the New York Times about this, he said, the reporter responded, "Our editor isn't that interested." This is a perfect example of how Are they lying by not reporting on it? Well, arguably dereliction of duty, but also by just selectively reporting, you could have the
Mhm.
greatest bias in media that you'll come across. I come
Jeffrey
across this
Epstein.
all the time.
Nobody
Yeah,
knows this guy. We're not interested. What? Yeah, like,
yeah, really.
it
Who
wasn't
was it?
until
Was it
Trump was
Ehud Barak?
involved
Yeah.
that they got excited. Yeah, who Barack?
Yeah,
Yeah, he went
Ehud
to the Lake
Barak is like
Mansion
walking out of his Manhattan mansion, and he's like covered up to his eyes,
with a
like
fur hat.
like Prime Minister of Israel coming out of Epstein's house.
Yeah, one of them, several. Uh yeah, and the president of Israel, while Ehud was prime minister, got convicted of rape. Moshe Katsev. He raped other Jewish people, so he had consequences. But like that whole home, they had all the underage girls and stuff and a bunch of prostitutes. It's just that's still the biggest story. The public is so interested in Epstein, but you cannot mention that on mainstream news. They only gave it a little bit of attention when they thought it would go back to Trump. And when it didn't, they
Yeah.
all lost interest.
Yeah, well, I had Nick Bryant on my show who wrote a book titled The Franklin Scandal, which he works
How
off
about
of
Nebraska?
Senator John DeCamp's book, The Franklin Cover Up. He collects a ton of primary documents, which are scanned in the appendix of this book, The Franklin Scandal. This is a pedophile ring operating in Washington, D.C. in the 80s with people like, gosh,
Larry King.
the guy's name is Lawrence King.
Yeah.
Who sang the national anthem at the Republican National Convention? But you have all of
I
these
call him the
very big
Black Larry
names.
King, not the talk show host Larry King.
Yeah, because people will think you're talking about the talk show host. But yeah, these rings, these blackmail rings, absolutely exist. You have whistleblowers like Troy Bonner, Paul
Yep.
Benassi, Noreen Gosh, the mother of Johnny Gosh, who has stayed very consistent in a lot of her claims. Only thing she lied about was whether she had seen her son. And then under oath said, yes, I did lie. And I did so because my son told me to. Well,
The kook
these
media tried
people,
to turn Johnny Gosh into Jeff Gannon. Jeff Gannon was a male prostitute. He is not Johnny Gosh. And he was sleeping with Ted Haggard and Karl Rove. But that is not the same person.
yeah. These scandals absolutely do exist, and it's amazing. You see all this research, and you're looking into it, and you go, "Well, hold on." You take a step back and say, "If this is true, why haven't I heard about it?" And I think with me, I just had to see like 20 examples of tons of evidence for something that didn't get a lot of attention. And I go, "Oh, well, it's just being actively suppressed." Just like a coup taking place in Haiti could literally just be ignored because they go, well, if it's about
80.
Putin,
Yeah.
then maybe we'll report something negative. But other than that, just nothing to. Joe Biden murdering 7 children on August 29th of 2021. Not really a big deal. But did you hear what Trump did with Stormy Daniels? Yeah, just completely ridiculous. That's why I'm so appreciative of shows like yours and this alternative media where we can get conversations with Jeffrey Sachs, Tucker
I
Carlson
love that.
interviewing
7
Vladimir Putin.
children murdered, but did you hear what Trump did with the prostitute? Or
Yeah,
not a prostitute, a pornography actress? I don't know how you say it.
yeah, yeah, really.
Actress, sure. That's it.
Just beyond, beyond pathetic.
Apparently, he's banging Karen McDougal too. I'm like, this doesn't make me feel less of the man. All right. Well, I got my brother hitting me up. We're gonna do Cherokee Bill. So hold on. Keith, thanks so much. I'll have you on again. It's always a pleasure. Put that book up on the screen one more time, please. So tell people where
Domestic
they can get it.
Imperialism, 9 Reasons I Left Progressivism. You could find this at libertarianinstitute.org. We are a nonprofit, so if you go to the website, you can download a free PDF of this book. These are the 9 chapters of a speech that I gave at the University Club in Arizona, making the case as to why I no longer advocate the policies of progressivism. And then the second portion of the book is a collection of quotes that I've come across in the last 14 years of reading books and why we at the Institute advocate libertarianism. That's libertarianinstitute.org.
Excellent. There you go, guys. Get the book. And I think they can follow you on Twitter as well. You do have an X account.
Correct. I am at AN_. capitalists. When I advocate capitalism, I'm referring to a social system based on the explicit recognition of private property and non aggressive contractual exchanges between private property owners and consenting adults. I'm in no way advocating just value money and make as much money as possible. That's
Yeah,
why at the
not the
beginning,
speculation crowd.
correct. Yeah, that's why at the first 2 pages of my book, I define all the terms I'm using and why it's important that we at least get on the same page before we start discussing complex issues.
I like it. Stay frosty, dude. All right, Scott Dawson coming on, Miko Peled coming on, talking about the anti-APAC lobby that's being formed in DC. Keith, I'll see you. I got to get another guest up.
Take care, Ryan. Thanks for having me.